Good morning, everyone. I won't do the aloha thing, but to jump right into things, we have two super distinguished guest panelists who have spent what seems like thousands of years in the cloud and then some. So first of all, to my left, we have Lou Tucker, who recently was at Cisco running cloud for them. But he goes way back to the early days of network as the computer at Sun, so has a broad degree of experience. Then we have James Staten also, who's a VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester. He was at Forrester, went to Microsoft for a while, was running cloud strategy there, went to Equinix and was doing a variety of things, including business development, and then is now back at Forrester and is focused a little bit more on digital transformation and corporate strategy and what this all means, so we'll have a lively discussion. So the topic of today's discussion, if you can't tell, is actually a little bit of a clever pun, maybe not that clever, but it's a trillion things about the cloud, which is we're going to delve into some things because these two have an incredible amount of knowledge in this area, but also it's the idea that we're rapidly evolving the kind of infrastructure and applications that are possible. So just to quickly review a decade of history, people were like, there's no such thing as the cloud, it's a myth, whatever. Then they realized it's real, but the architectural design that was public cloud centered was primarily oriented towards large hyperscale facilities with tens of thousands or 100,000 or more servers that offered a consolidated facility for processing. I've been arguing for a decade that hybrid was the right approach for most customers. People now realize that. People understand that multi-clouds are also important, but the thing that has seemed to elude people's consciousness until recently is the idea that there are really a variety of trade-offs, and there's no perfect solution. There's a trade-off between private and public, and they both have their advantages. There are also trade-offs between highly consolidated facilities and this edge architecture that will interact with the trillion things that will exist. And just briefly, before we get into the discussion, that number, a trillion, is not as crazy as it sounds. People talk about 10 billion things or 20 billion things, but a trillion things in a world of 7 billion people only works out to about 120 devices per person. And with the rapid decreases in costs of processing, power life, connectivity, 5G, addressing, there's no doubt that's going to happen. So let me start off by asking each of you what you're seeing as far as the trends in the marketplace, and you both have talked to thousands of customers, so what do you see as far as where their head is at?
Sure, thank you. Well, it's clear, as you say, that the cloud now is all pervasive, and it touches many, many different parts of our life. So I think that what we're seeing more than anything else is that the amount of innovation that's happening now is accelerating because of a lot of different things in terms of number of available services. Computing has become very, very cheap. It's become very, very quick for startups to start new services, so that the disruption caused initially by the internet in terms of disrupting hospitality, with Airbnb, transportation, with Uber, now it's just accelerating. And so the definition of cloud now has become even murky because we've got cloud and fog and edge, and we've got serverless, and we've got AI coming into it. So it's actually a challenge for many companies to try to keep up with this. As they look at their data centers, or they look at how they've originally been using just one or two SaaS applications, now it's everywhere. And they have to really rethink what they're doing in order to be most effective.
Yeah, and a lot of what we've seen from our conversations with enterprises, and this goes to Joe's point before, is that when we started down the path of cloud, there was very much versus being used in a lot of conversations. Public cloud versus private cloud. The business unit bringing in SaaS applications versus IT saying what services we should be using. And versus is going away. We're now at the point where it is full embrace. The private cloud does not compete against the public cloud. It is a way of taking your legacy applications and making them cloud-enabled and allowing you to build agile services and capabilities that tap those services and tap that data, especially when you API empower those applications. And when it comes to SaaS, the business units are still picking new SaaS services and capabilities to bring forth, and they're doing it because it drives customer experience gains. And IT departments who are embracing this and recognizing this isn't shadow IT, this is business empowerment. And we as the IT department, if we reposition ourselves not as the managers of old technology, but as the transformational technological leads, we can reposition ourselves to drive what you talked about, a lot of the innovations that help us create net new experiences for our customers and take them to the next level. And as a result, we're seeing more and more enterprises getting very, very comfortable with pay-per-use aspects of all of the cloud services, which are by default. And they're now asking everybody else who provides technological services to them to match that pay-per-use model. So if you're not comfortable offering your services in pay-per-use, learn how to get comfortable over the next few years.
So, you know, having been to PTC many years in a row, it's very interesting to see just how the center of gravity has shifted, where people are now, really, there's a lot more vendors here that have edge somewhere in their name, and service providers and dialogue, like across the keynote sessions and the topical sessions. So to what extent do you think that this is being driven by vendors and service providers versus there are real compelling use cases that are pulling this technology?
Well, there are absolutely very compelling reasons for the edge capability and to bring AI, machine learning, and other data analysis capabilities to the edge. Much of the focus, of course, has been on IoT, and IoT, of course, is happening all over the manufacturing world, all across government agencies, where we're seeing sensor enablement become incredibly empowered all over the place. But we also have to recognize there's also a play here in customer experience, because how many of you don't have a smartphone? And that smartphone is an edge device that is going to analyze the data it's got, but if it has a weak connection to Google Cloud statistics, weak connections to other data sets that matter, then that edge experience sucks. And so we have to really be thinking through how can we enhance all of our customers' experiences, whether they're commercial, whether they're consumer, by taking advantage of cloud services in combination with the edge.
Well, this brings up another question, which I don't know if you want to jump in or just let James handle the last one. All right. So that brings up the question of to what extent are the networks that we have now and or are deploying suitable for this new architecture, because the traditional architectures obviously have evolved, and the big fat backbone architectures that connected enterprise data centers through like a direct connect facility, through an interconnection facility, let's say, to the cloud, are very different than trying to reach 1 trillion devices that are the endpoints that connect through the edge and that may have multiple layers of fog before we get up to the hyperscale facilities. So are we there? Are there big challenges? Is that a great opportunity for some of the people in this audience to help solve? Where do we stand on network considerations?
Well, I still think, you know, the reason why we're having a conversation about edge is that the cloud is too far away. For most consumers and devices and things like that, speed of light, we have real limitations, and that doesn't matter what we talk about the transport until we can actually, you know, do, you know, quantum, you know, mechanics with entanglement and everything else. It's just too far away to get to all the services. So almost all services I know today are trying to become distributed, not just across multiple data centers on a big backbone, but then as close to the customer as they can be. And so that, I think, you know, ties together the things that have made the internet successful. Distributed processing. We need to be able to have resiliency through that. Now you actually can be closer to the customer. You know, backhauling a cell phone back into some home or whatever and then pinging it back, we all know isn't viable anymore. So that getting these services closer and closer to the customer, regardless of transport, whether it's 5G or whatever, we've got to get close to the customer.
Yeah, and every telco needs to be thinking more about what does the telco service mean today, because it is not about just providing connectivity. If that is how you're thinking about it, welcome to the 1990s. You need to be focusing on what can you do atop that capability, and not just empowering your ecosystem and just empowering the cloud to use your telecommunication network to pass data back and forth, but how much of the analysis and the insights can you empower on your own? And where you have the ability to reach more metros, more customers, more capabilities, that's where you have the greatest opportunity for empowerment. And you need to be also thinking about not you versus the cloud, but you and your cloud services. How can you empower your customers with the same value propositions, with complementary services and capabilities that really help your customers see that you guys are cloud providers and you have services and capabilities that can help them get more from it? And one of the biggest things that we're talking a lot about at Forrester, and my colleague Andre Kindness has written a really good set of reports about this, is that not only do you need to be thinking about this, but enterprises need to as well. Because enterprises oftentimes say, my corporate network is the Ethernet through the single vendor we've done business with. And this helped Cisco for quite a long period of time. But now you have to recognize you need to have very fast, secure connectivity and edge analytics functionalities at all of your locations, connected to all of your ecosystem partners, and empowering all of your most important customers. And that means crossing the networks together, interconnecting your hybrid multi-cloud architecture, and empowering these solutions where they're not tied to the limitations of one vendor versus another.
I mean,
Billy, you wanted to jump in and then?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that this conference now is talking about from pipes to platforms. And now maybe we've just muddied the waters a bit, because now what do we mean by a platform? But in NIST years ago sort of defined this thing, which was PaaS, platforms as a service, that we've seen become inverted. It's really services become the new platform. And that to the extent to which telcos and everything can bring those services to their customers, it almost doesn't matter whether it's their networks or somebody else's networks. It's the services that the customers, that has the value that the customer wants to get. They really do not care how they get it. What they want to be able to do is have somebody who can reliably provide those services, can link them to the best, most cost-effective services, can provide the most intelligence in those services. So it takes us really, have to really think deeply about what do we mean by a platform. A platform is that thing upon which other applications and services is built. And you have to think that way, and it's no longer than your infrastructure. It's really the set of services you can start to provide.
So I have a follow-up question to your comment, but I want to also say that I'm going to open it up for audience questions in a couple of minutes, because everyone's saying you all need to consider this. So I'd love to hear what exactly your thoughts are or your open questions. But I just want to go back to something that you mentioned right at the beginning, James, which is this notion that it isn't versus, but it's and. And I think a lot of people have this notion that the reason for the edge is all about latency reduction. And what I just want to clarify is, first of all, that there are many different reasons to consider the edge, but also that there are many reasons to actually avoid the edge. And so I've looked at a lot of the statistics around this, and just to give you some examples without putting everyone to sleep this early, there are benefits to aggregating workloads in a central facility. So there are statistical multiplexing benefits when I have varying workloads, and I can basically get a smoothing effect that therefore means I can get a reduced capacity benefit, which therefore means that I can get an increased utilization benefit, and therefore my delivered cost is lower. As far as latency, everyone thinks about latency to the edge, but as we move into, let's say, microservices, it would be a disaster if we had a tightly coupled application that had distributed microservices that were interacting with each other, where, you know, to look up a row in a database, I had to go halfway across the world, spend 160 milliseconds round trip before I could do the next calculation. So there are benefits to consolidation, benefits to dispersion, but as we move to move just beyond the cloud edge discussion, as we move to this new world of containers and microservices and sort of the efficient agile development processes and so forth, you had mentioned to me sort of a service mesh concept that you saw as being this emerging requirement, and it was new to me, so I'd love it if you would share it with people. And then
because I think it's particularly...
sorry, one second, but while you're talking, if anyone does have a question, are there runners? Can the runner hold up their hand? Mic runners, there is. So if you can either grab the mic runner's attention or move over to where she is, that would be great, and then we'll have a question. So please, go ahead.
It's particularly germane, I think, to the conversation at this conference, because As we break up these applications, distributing them more, make them based upon containers, the advantage that you have now is that you have it closer to the customer. You've got applications that can be developed by different application development teams without knowing everything about the totality of the application. Services are now becoming an assembly process of these different services, like you say, looking up something, well, get it from the closest database. So there is a service mesh that many people are talking about now. It's have different incarnations. One that I've been working on in particular is called Istio. It's based on Kubernetes. And what I think is particularly appealing about that is that now every microservice, we took a monolithic application, you broke it up into microservices, but now that poor guy who developed the microservice has to know everything about networking and authentication and encryption and everything else. Instead, put a proxy in front of it, and now you have a separate network at the application level that's controlling the traffic. So you can do A/B deployments, you can shift traffic, you can do traffic shaping by the application. They can actually respond to load in that way. So it's particularly applicable, I think, that anybody who is in providing connectivity to be aware that they can start to run service meshes for their customers. These service meshes can cross clouds. It's where multi-cloud starts to come into it. Because I think where we are going long-term is that just like we did with board-level development of boards with chips on it that you could get out of a catalog, application development becoming an assembly of services. And being able to have those services from different providers, you can quickly come up with a new application, but you have all of the things that you have to worry about now, encryption, authentication, being able to do traffic shaping across this. So that's where a service mesh, it comes in a lot of different names.
If I can just dumb it down for me, what comes to mind is LinkedIn.
Yep.
If you know someone's email, then you're fine until their email address changes, and then you're out of contact with them.
It's a social network for applications.
If you go through LinkedIn, then you're connected to them even as, so LinkedIn is acting as a proxy for that person's actual email, right?
Exactly.
So, okay. Do we have any questions? It's really hard to see up here with all the lights, so can somebody yell out? There's a question. Okay, this gentleman over here. You're all a haze of darkness from the stage.
Who's gonna build and operate the services mesh, and is anyone working on it now?
Like I say, in the open source community, there's a lot of development going on right now. There's several startups that I see that are talking about providing this kind of control plane across multiple clouds and multiple services that they will provide a subscription to. So I think we will not see one service mesh. We will see many service meshes started by mostly out of the startup community, but supported by open source so everybody can build to us. And we have, particularly with Kubernetes, Kubernetes has a very straightforward kind of resource model that allows us to extend APIs very readily. That enables something like a service mesh. I know that Cisco, we're looking at service mesh, but many other companies, I mean, large cloud providers are all going to be providing this. Google is a big backer of Istio and is making that available in their cloud.
Okay. Any other, is there a second question? Raise your hand if so, otherwise. Okay, so at Forrester, you obviously talk to a lot of clients and they're sort of plotting out their strategy, whether they're cloud service providers or enterprises or network service providers. What are the common themes that you're hearing, James, and kind of how is it varying? Is there a win-win-win, or is it a win-lose zero-sum game? What are the common concerns, and can you give us free Forrester advice for those of us that aren't yet Forrester clients, or is there some, I have the answer, but you have to hire me if you want to know what it is?
Yeah, the big themes that we're seeing overall are how can the IT department reposition themselves as the technology innovation leader and the digital transformation driver. And this does involve embracing these new technologies, empowering their developers, as you talked about, so that they can build agile applications, but also empowering your marketing, your product, your sales teams, and so forth to deliver great new values. And that even goes down the path of going and embracing low code, so that your marketing department can actually write new services and capabilities they want to add because they're getting immediate feedback from customers that this is really important. So that's one of the big themes. And then when they look to their vendors, the vendors they see as strategic partners going forward are changing. Where strategic partners in the past have been people they spent the most money with, Now they're looking for the ones who are really empowering them to make these transformations. And so if you want to ensure a strategic partnership with your biggest customers, and this is true not just of enterprises, but also of government agencies, you do want to show how you are empowering them to do this. And to your point before, one of the key aspects of this is that, as you've seen in the past, there's still a concern among a lot of enterprises about using proprietary technologies that lock them into one particular play. And so as you're building out new innovative capabilities and functions that empower them, while they will want to use it from you if it does empower them, they will limit how much they use it unless you make it part of a standard or you release that technology or that enhancement to the open source world. And one thing that a lot of companies need to learn, and Tesla has done a great job at teaching this, as other companies have as well, is when you have intellectual property that differentiates your offering and takes the market to the next level, if you open source that technology, it empowers the rest of the ecosystem to use it and to bring it forward. And that's what we've seen with Tesla do with all their intellectual property around autonomous vehicles. And we're seeing companies like GM, Ford, and others who are using those open source technologies to accelerate their path to this future as well. And that's what we really need to make sure happens so that customers can see the value of cross-vendor solutions and cross-vendor technologies. And that's how you can empower them.
So more power to Tesla. That was a little energy joke. Okay, sorry. So, okay, one person got it. Thanks, Craig. All right, so even though you're both super capable in every dimension, I'm going to pin you down as like the business-oriented person and you as the technology, even though I know you can both play both roles completely. So the question from a technology perspective is, the world is changing, and the world where I had a single cloud provider, let's say AWS, Microsoft, whoever, with a full suite of services, in a way it was easy because I could build all those things. I knew my enterprise data center would be hooked up to that, and that's great. In this new world where, as you're alluding to, I've got this heterogeneous set of providers, different elements at the end, they're intermittently connected, some of them are mobile, they're homing into different base stations, et cetera, isn't there like a whole new crazy set of technological challenges that, where do we stand? Is this like a solved deal, or should enterprises be wary of until, like, you know, all the kinks are worked out in this?
No, well, actually, I think it's almost the opposite. We are awash in technology right now. We've got so many choices. And I think that, therefore,
Which is not necessarily a good thing, right?
Which is not necessarily a good thing, because what we want to be able, if you're going to have common platforms so that you can build ecosystems on that, you need to have some agreement on what those common platforms might be. So we're seeing some of that, for example, in the rise of Kubernetes. We're seeing actually in terms of cloud computing, we never reached a point where we have a single cloud API. And yet what we're seeing is that many people, the models are close enough that you can actually have portability between this. But Kubernetes, for example, I think is a big step forward in terms of doing that. Even at Cisco, that we released a Kubernetes platform on premise that matches that in Google and that in Azure and that in Amazon, making it so that you can have portability of applications. So you are not tied into a particular vendor. You can move applications from your data center to the cloud and back. Now the fight's going to be over managing that. So what management console do you use if you want to be managing things in your data center and in 2 or 3 other cloud providers, and you need to integrate the authentication identity of the SaaS applications?
Yeah, how do you do fault isolation?
But that's
how
good,
do you do
because that's
performance
moving up the
optimization?
stack, relying on a common platform. And so we're continually building. We've always done it in computer science. We build layer of abstraction on layer of abstraction as we get closer and closer to what the user actually wants.
All right, well, we are just about out of time, so
Wasn't
you
there a
were
business side of
both
that?
sort of around. Do you want to maybe just provide your Twitter handles or whatever, so everyone has them if they want to get in touch with either of you?
Sure, at Lew Tucker, Lewtucker.
And I'm at Staten, the number 7.
Okay, so with that, let me thank my great guests and thank you for your attention and involvement.